Today's ceremony marks a joyous departure. We will honor one who can hear our tributes and who can rise and speak on his own behalf without causing grave consternation. We do this on our 50th year, but should the truth be told, our timing is but serendipitous coincidence. How could the Cave Hill campus not but honor for posterity, whatever the occasion, Sir Keith Hunte, truly its native son? Sir Keith's academic career began with our own beginnings at the fledgling College of Arts and Sciences at the Deepwater Harbor, when in 1964, 1 year after the college opened, he was appointed lecturer in history. He made the journey from the harbor to the hill, where he would soon begin his ascent to its most rarefied heights. He went on to serve as Dean of the Faculty of Arts and General Studies from 1978 to 1980. He was appointed Deputy Principal that same year and became Acting Principal from September to November 1983, when he was appointed Pro-Vice Chancellor and the Principal of the Cave Hill campus. This campus has been blessed in the varied and complementary talents of its chief executive officers. Sir Keith's talent, recognized and exploited across the university, is his diplomacy and capacity for consensus building. The recognition of this was implicit in Sir Sidney Martin's assignment to him of responsibility for leading negotiations with our bargaining unit, his appointment by then Vice Chancellor McIntyre to lead the Semester System Committee, and as chair of the Implementation Committee established following the 1994 restructuring exercise. These talents were evidenced in countless other instances of the way he did business, this man of sense and sensibility. As a maturing registrar during his tenure, I was privileged to witness his emphasis on team management, to learn from his respect for our structures of governance, and to be sensitized to the culture of collegiality which came to characterize the Cave Hill campus. We salute Sir Keith, too, for the eminence of his public service. He has served variously and, inter alia, as Chairman of the Public Service Commission, Chairman of the National Reconciliation Commission, Chair of the Caribbean Examinations Council, Caribbean Broadcasting Corporation, the Electoral and Boundaries Commission, and the Barbados Community College. He has served, too, as a member of the Board of Education, the National Curriculum Development Council, and the Advisory Committee of the Barbados Workers' Union Labor College. In 1987, the then Dr. Hunte was made Knight of St. Andrew in recognition of his contribution to higher education in the Caribbean. It is quite fitting that our beautiful Hall of Residence, which we will declare open today, should be named after Sir Keith, in whose tenure the expansion of the Cave Hill campus's built space began. Through university-wide loan funding, the building space in the main library was doubled. There was considerable expansion in the infrastructure of the now Faculty of Science and Technology, with the addition of a new biology block, a new mathematics building, and computer laboratories, and a central facility, our computer center. His legacy includes the building which now houses the Department of Management Studies, the expansion and the renovation of Sherlock Hall, renovation of the SCR and the Shell Block, and of course the construction of the Sir Frank Worrell Hall of Residence, which added 180 rooms to our student accommodation stock. And I recognize the manager of our hall's administrator, Welcome. This new Hall of Residence will now add another 64 rooms, bringing our total complement of rooms to 334. Ladies and gentlemen, the recognition accorded well beyond our shores to so many persons present here today is testimony to this university's global reach and the enormous wealth of its contribution to the societies it serves. 3 of our speakers, including our honoree, have received the highest of civil honors, knighthoods, for their contributions to education. That all of these are historians is a matter of curiosity and for dangerous hypothesis. Our next speaker is a man of such distinction and international repute that we need not, to borrow Rex Nettleford's phrase, gild the anthurium. His life's passions of public education, in the meaning of our historical legacy, in issues of social justice, and for the perpetuation of the institution of West Indies cricket, have gained him, and through him, the University of the West Indies, recognition in many corners of the globe. He is the architect of the naming project, which will ensure that after this, our 50th year, our stalwarts will not be associated with the injunction of the ghost of Hamlet's father, adieu, remember me. He told us recently that having succeeded Sir Keith in 2 jobs, he is now quite sensitive to the latter's trajectory. His anxiety, though, is our continued good fortune. Please welcome to the podium our Principal and Pro Vice Chancellor.
We continue our celebration and our thanksgiving for all members of the KFL family who have stood by this campus, and especially those who have had responsibility for making the strategic decisions that have made the campus into what we would like it to be. I cannot speak about Sir Keith without forcing my own self into the conversation. And I tried last night to conceptualize a speech in which I would be totally objective and removed from the commentary, and I failed. You would have heard on numerous occasions my making reference to the fact that my own journey at KFL has been a result of Sir Keith's generosity. He was made a principal in 1984, and that enabled me to have an opportunity to come home. There was then a vacancy in the history department. And between Woodville and himself, somehow they concocted a strategy to transfer me from the Mona campus, where I was quite happy and enjoying myself, to be told that I have work to do in Barbados. And I was transferred from Mona to KFL, and I thank Sir Keith for that. Then I was sitting merrily on the Mona campus and heard that I was asked to return to KFL as principal because Sir Keith had retired, and once again I packed up my bags from Mona, where I was quite happy, and returned to KFL. That would tell you then that my 30 or so years have been deeply intertwined with Sir Keith's own trajectory. I had the pleasure of being called to serve in his cabinet as a dean. In fact, I remember very well, I was busily enjoying myself in the history department, and Sir Keith called and said, well, listen, it's time that you become a head. Because in those days, things have changed a bit. In those days, if you were young and busy, the principal would leave you alone. But then the time would come where you were told, well, it's your turn to pull your weight. And I had a free hand in the history department for many years. Then I was told it was my turn to be head. And then I was told it was my turn to be dean. And then I was told it was my turn to be dean and head simultaneously. Because in those days, when you had a free hand, then suddenly the free ride came to an end. So I served as a dean in the steering committee of academic board with Sir Keith. And I can say that if I acquired any skills whatsoever in the process of administration, I would have learned those skills observing and participating in Sir Keith's cabinet. And it's important to say that because there are a number of issues that immediately come to mind. For example, many persons have spoken about the rapid expansion of the KFL demographic during my time. But oftentimes not understood was that Sir Keith's expansion was in fact larger than my own expansion. Because Sir Keith moved the population from 1,000 to 4,000, I moved it from 3 to 6. And clearly I'm not a mathematician, but if you move from 1 to 4, and then someone moved from 4 to 6 or 7, the 1 to 4 is larger. Am I not correct? Bertie, where's the math man? I saw Bertie somewhere. Bertie, isn't that true? Okay. And so expansion then was continuous. I can also say to you that taking the responsibility for managing this campus after Sir Keith was, on the one hand, an easy task, but on the other hand, a difficult task. It was easy because everything was already in place. Structures were in place. The community spirit of the campus was in place. The collegiality of the campus was in place. The goodwill of everyone was in place. All of those things were already in place. The campus was already a smoothly running machine. It was difficult because, of course, the fear was, how can this be sustained? The first thing that any rational person would do in that situation is to say, well, who are the key persons who enable Sir Keith to succeed? And identify them and ask them to stay. That's the first thing you would do. Andrew Lewis, architect. Jackie came on board. Morris Webster, the bursar. Argument was, nobody's retiring, nobody's moving. Nobody's moving until we are up in the air and off again. Andrew stayed, Morris stayed, and then we did what we had to do. And we transitioned that the best we could by maintaining the persons who had his skills and his strategy. And in a sense, therefore, what we did was to continue the Hunte's vision for the campus. That is what we tried to do, to maintain that continuity through the time. If you take, for example, the issue of acquiring these lands, the conversation with the government about acquiring these 39, 40 acres of land, that conversation started with Sir Keith. Sir Keith had that conversation with the government of Barbados. My task then was to take that conversation and bring it to closure. So we took it up, met with the government, second round, and in the second round we were able to secure these lands. We did not enter into a fresh conversation. We opened the file and went back to the conversation in order to acquire these lands for the development of the campus. So it was really a matter of always opening the file and seeing how to take the conversations forward. We decided to develop a dormitory complex here. And in our conception of all of this, we had imagined or had decided upon 4 structures. Is that right? 4 dormitory structures. We entered into a financial arrangement with the private sector and the government of Barbados to develop all of this space into a major dormitory complex for regional and international students, because we imagined that this was going to be a major revenue generator, not only for the campus, but foreign exchange for the university. The key element in our international strategy, to bring foreign students into this campus, into this country, drive academic tourism, drive educational tourism, and move the country and the campus forward simultaneously. The funding model, which was approved, somehow entered into rocky waters, and the financial arrangements were withdrawn. The result being that we were able just to complete one structure rather than three structures. And I believe that this was, to some extent, a devastating blow to the campus. But nonetheless, we are entering into a new round of conversation about the return to the fundamental vision of this complex. And understand that we are always receiving requests from international universities to send large numbers of students to Cave Hill and to Barbados. We are one of the most popular international sites for international students, but almost on every occasion, I speak to the provost of an American university or the president of an American university. The downfall for us, our lack of competitiveness, is because we do not have the accommodations. And these provosts would say, we do not wish to have our students in a back room in Wanstead. We do not wish to have our students in a back room in Cave Hill. Give us a package. X thousand for tuition fees, X thousand for accommodation. Give us a package and we will send the students. We have not been able to do that as well as we wish because we have not had the facilities. And thus, I plea once again to the government of Barbados to let us get back to the table on the completion of this project. The international concept of Cave Hill was formulated by Sir Keith. He developed the notion of bringing and taking Cave Hill away from its provincial base into its regional and international dimensions. And this is something also that we have built upon. And it's appropriate then that we should name this complex in honor of Sir Keith, not only because this is the beginning of the symbol of our international student enrollment accommodation project, but also too because these lands were first brought into the campus's discursive remit as a possible frontier for our growth when Sir Keith opened those conversations with the government of Barbados. And I end, therefore, by saying this. When you try to distill the fundamental features of Sir Keith's leadership, a number of things immediately come to mind. And bear in mind that we have tried, and I have tried certainly to continue some of those and to identify with some of those. I might have failed on the first one. In fact, I know I failed on the first one because the first one was that everyone at Cave Hill loved Keith Hunte. And why and how has to do with many, many things. We all love Keith Hunte because he was kind, because he was generous. I have never heard Sir Keith utter an ill word about anyone. He was kind, he was generous, and he had everyone's back, including my own, because in the years of my turbulence in Barbados, it was touch and go, but I could say that at my moment of greatest vulnerability, Sir Keith had my back. So yes, so there were all of those features that Sir Keith laid the foundation for the building of a Cave Hill family that has remained cohesive. We are going through some very difficult times at the moment financially. The campus is feeling all of the stresses and the strains of the fiscal difficulties faced by the country. And clearly we are in a state of stasis, and to some extent we are rolling back on some issues. And this is generating some fear. But we recognize that there's also fear in the country, that the country too has its own concerns. So we're all in this together. But the critical thing is that I remember very well in the early 1990s when our budgets were slashed and things were very, very difficult, which eventually led to the fiscal adjustments that were put in place in the country, unpleasant at the time, that Sir Keith gathered the deans in steering committee and we met. And Sir Keith made it very clear with Mr. Cook, who was responsible for crunching the numbers and making sure that we were fiscally above board, that the campus will get through this. We are not going to retrench anyone. We will band together, we will do the cuts we have to take, we will make them, and we design a structure of cost cutting, a structure of saving on expenditure, and we went through a very difficult and painful exercise to protect the campus, to save it, and to save everyone's jobs. And that was a project that was magnificently executed by the principal and working closely with the bursar. And I was there to watch and to witness that execution. So we're here at it again. So the choice before me then is to either ask Sir Keith to come back and run the campus, or we can do it the way he did it. And that's exactly what we have been trying to do it the way he did it. Plan it, look at our numbers, look at our costs, our expenditure, and keep at the center of all things that we are doing the security, the job security of all of our colleagues. That is our principal target, to protect and to preserve the livelihood of all members of the KFL family. And so we are on that journey. I would wish also now to recognize our architect. I thought I saw Maurice, for your skillful design. I wish to recognize Steve, Mr. Steve, who is our builder, the conceptualizer of the facility, the builder of the facility. We thank you so much. And so I believe then, finally, that this morning, once again, the KFL community is doing the right thing. So Keith, we thank you.
I think I should tell you a bit more about our Keith Hunte Hall, because to many of us here who were used to more Spartan accommodations in our own student days, I think it is really quite luxurious. It has 64 single rooms in suites of 4. Each floor is arranged in 4 clusters, which can accommodate 4 students, each served by a spacious, well-equipped kitchen, living and dining area, and bathroom facilities. Each student's room is outfitted with a ceiling fan, a single bed, built-in desk, wired and wireless internet access, wardrobe, and face basin. I think that is pretty good going, I think. Sir Hilary has told us of his long association with Sir Keith. Together, they were pioneering builders, gifted teachers, and academic administrators in our Department of History and the Faculty of Humanities, who, in recognition of their talents, were called to service at the level of the university's executive management as pro-vice chancellors. Sir Woodville has retired only in the sense that he has certified the receipt of certain benefits from our bursar. His prodigious intellectual energy is unabated, as is his commitment to public education, for which he was knighted in Her Majesty the Queen's Birthday Honours List in 2011. This continued commitment is evidenced by his publications and membership of and effective advocacy for the programs of the Barbados Museum and the Historical Society, his contribution to our own Archives and Records Management Committee, of which he was the first chair, to name just a few. We eagerly await the launch in about 2 weeks of our commemorative text, A History of the Cave Hill Space, which he has authored, allowing us to add to his other accolades the title of Cave Hill Griot. Ladies and gentlemen, Professor Sir Woodville Marshall.
Let me say straight off that I make no apologies if these remarks have a very personal flavor. After all, Sir Keith, as I'm going to call him KD most of the time, is still very much with us. And I've known him for nearly 60 years. We were students together at Mono in the 1950s. We were, as you have heard, colleagues in history and administration at this university for over 35 years. And we were and are associated with this particular campus in one way or another for the last 43 years. And I know that in some quarters, we might even have been perceived, sometimes, as friendly rivals for various university appointments. But even as I indulge in a few flashbacks that might illuminate a few moments in KD's relationship with the university and this campus, I know that I must take guard against what happened to a friend of mine. He gave the eulogy at his sister's funeral, but probably because he was underprepared, he spent so much time talking not about the dear departed, but about himself, that the rector felt forced to signal to him to shut up and move on. I am sure that I can rely on Jackie, who is a past mistress at the art of the surreptitious signal of objection, to gently indicate when and if I stray too far outside of my crease. So, my flashbacks. My first flashback is about meeting the man for the first time. And this was probably in the summer of 1956 when I was home from Mona, and it would have taken place at the Jordan's house in St. John. But I must say that I'd already heard about KD, mainly in his guise as a successful middle distance runner for the law school. And I suppose that we could see his career as one long run from and along the dusty cart roads of St. John towards top prizes and high office. But I also know that some of his intimates might say that the running prowess was honed as much by running from as by running towards. But we shall not dwell on that at this stage. The mention of our first meeting prompts me to quickly reflect on a few things. One is that despite all the apparent rivalry in sporting and academic activities between the so-called elite schools of Barbados, some of the students of those schools were genuine friends. And I think that this was mainly apparent among the country boys, who were, of course, untainted by privilege. Therefore, the Jordan House in St. John and the Borough House in St. George were meeting places for those whose lives were not defined by school ties. The other related point is this, that KD, like me, was very much a product of a school and social environment where there was a continuing tension between privilege and talent. And in KD's case, it could be said that the extramural contacts that I've just been talking about were at least as significant as, say, teaching by Fab Hoyos in forming his personality. What is impressive is that unlike some others, KD emerged from this challenging school and social environment as temperate, at least temperate in most things, with a wise head on young shoulders. And I would suggest that wise head on young shoulders endowed him with those interpersonal skills which he would fully develop later on. My second flashback takes us to the mid-1960s, and what I call that the making of a leader. I skate over the intervening 10 years when we were both studying at Mona and elsewhere because we had limited contact, and I'm not going to go into that at the moment. But I'm fully aware that KD, like myself, would have been positively influenced by some of our teachers, particularly Rayoje and the incomparable Elsa Govile. The mid-60s the mid-1960s were important, or are important, for at least three reasons. One, the least important, is that we both returned to the University of the West Indies at roughly the same time. I went to Mona, and Katie joined Tony Phillips here as the history teachers on this campus. The second reason is far more important, because Katie, as you've already heard, in joining the fledgling campus, was naturally co-opted at the start of his professional career into a leadership role. Therefore, one could say that with Sidney Martin proffering advice and example on academic administration, that Katie was inducted quickly into that part of his career in which he gained conspicuous success. But I must emphasize that while it was the youth of the campus which provided this early opportunity for KD to begin to demonstrate leadership, he became a leader because others saw in him those qualities of tact and level-headedness, which we might say were essential qualities for working with academics and administrators who could sometimes be as fractious and as narrow-minded as their fellows in the so-called real world. The third reason why I call attention to the mid-60s is that both of us fell under the spell, or I might say, we were all both mentored by that superb leader, Douglas Hall, who was then the professor and head of the Department of History at Mona and the perennial dean of the Faculty of Arts. In those days, before departments were established in the outlying provinces of Cave Hill and St. Augustine, Douglas Hall presided over 3 campus departments. And it was the way in which he discharged that role, not as a Mona imperialist, but as one with a little bit more experience and wisdom than all of us. That is what was impressive. He had clear notions, or he already had clear opinions on all the pertinent matters, but he was prepared to hear all views, to negotiate where necessary, to seek consensus, and then to vigorously implement the results of such consensus. I confess that I learned all that I ever got to know about academic administration from watching this master at work. And I'm sure that KD too, who was the subject leader for history on this campus, had a similar experience. Therefore, with these 2 Jamaicans as models and mentors, Sidney Martin on one side and Douglas Hall on the other, the making of the academic leader was well advanced by the time that the 1970s rolled around. Which takes me then to my third flashback of the 1970s, when I call building collegiality and the academic base. The 1970s could be said to be the period when this campus came of age inside the University of the West Indies system. This could be seen in the extension of the Mona administrative structure to the campus, as well as to St. Augustine, but it was especially apparent in the expansion of teaching programs, in a growing sense of collegiality, and in the extent of the growing influence that Cave Hill staff members had on policy making inside the central councils of the university. In all of this, KD was most prominent, and I shall offer a few illustrations. KD is one, as you would expect, was always a stalwart of the senior common room. And since I had developed a similar affinity with the Mona senior common room, it was easy for him to induct me into our new home away from home. But it is not to the spirits that accompanied my reception at Cave Hill that I want to direct your attention. Rather, it is to the extent that KD made space for me and ensured that others gave me space on this campus. I make the point because I did overhear one of my new colleagues complaining to Leslie Robinson that Mona had sent Marshall to Cave Hill. presumably to spread a Mona message. The point is that my presence might have disturbed the local hierarchy, of which Katie was a prominent member, but he most graciously stepped aside as subject leader, and no doubt he calmed any fears among his numerous friends about the extent to which I might be a Mona spy. And I suspect also that he strongly supported Sidney Martin's decision that almost immediately I should become the Vice Dean of the Faculty of General Studies. My second illustration comes from the review of the curriculum inside our faculty, which we undertook in 1970 to 71. The most important consequence of that review was the addition of West Indian literature to the curriculum. But it was the way in which the initiative was achieved that I might just say a little about. To summarize, we did a Douglas Hall. We had a prepared position. We heard and countered objections. We closely quizzed the subject leaders. And we achieved our objectives partly because we won the debate, but partly because we did the mandatory massaging of egos. Not we, must say that KD did the massaging. Because, as all of you know, his people skills are far superior to mine. I confess that I was sometimes irritated how in group meetings he could, after extended discussion, achieve agreement on a solution that I may have blurted out right at the beginning of the discussion, but which had encountered objection. So, you could understand the point of irritation. My third illustration comes from our shared discipline. In 1969, our colleagues at what is now the University of the Antilles and Guyana organized what turned out to be the first of the annual conferences of Caribbean historians. Douglas Hall quickly recognized the potential in this contact with colleagues across the region, and he decided that we, that is the historians in UWI, would reciprocate by holding a second conference, that is in Barbados, in Easter of 1970. And of course, it was KD who was charged with the principal responsibility of organizing that conference. That conference was a small conference when compared to those that succeeded it, but it was such a great success that Hall and us, but principally Hall, agreed that we must institutionalize the annual conference and also establish a corresponding committee to maintain contact with other historians of the Caribbean. In other words, what I'm saying, thanks mainly to KD's efforts in organizing the conference, the base for the Association of Caribbean Historians was laid. And I must add that until the persistent demands of academic administration diverted Keith's attention away from active promotion of his discipline, he was one of the ACH stalwarts, drafting our first constitution, mobilizing financial resources, participating, delivering papers in our sessions, one of those stalwarts who ensured that the ACH, that's what we call it, became the preferred professional organization for all historians and would-be historians of the Caribbean. My final flashback takes us to the 1980s and beyond, and we might call it, like Jackie, the ascent to the top. No one, least of all myself, could have been surprised when in 1981, KD was appointed to the newly created post of deputy principal and was therefore identified as Sidney Martin's likely successor as principal. He had gone through the ranks, as you've heard, and he had served with distinction in all the posts that he had held. And he had succeeded because he was tactful and diplomatic, but he had also demonstrated a clear sense of what he wanted to achieve. And he made it plain to almost everyone that he would not be time-serving and that he would not be all things to all men and women. I will not bore you, because you've heard it before and some of it is written down, by itemizing his achievements as principal. What merely needs to be said is that his tenure was one of consolidation. And what I mean by that term is this. If it might be said that by the end of Sidney Martin's term, the viability of this campus at last seemed assured, because there was some doubt about it before, then KD's contribution was to build on that base in every conceivable direction: facilities, programs, student numbers, outreach to the community, and, not least of all, expanded influence inside the university. All that I have said might in retrospect seem like small beer when compared with the colossal expansion presided over by the current principal. But the valid comparison, I would suggest, is not with what has occurred since KD's tenure, but rather with what preceded it. I might notice in particular the extent to which KD, as a principal and a pro-vice chancellor, became various vice chancellors' go-to man. I mean, that is permanent vice chancellors as well as acting vice chancellors, because I think it was Leslie Robinson who actually appointed you to chair the semester thing. He was their go-to man whenever difficult or delicate exercises had to be undertaken. And semesterization, of course, was perhaps the most fundamental, perhaps the most momentous change in the functioning of the university that occurred, and obviously it qualifies as one of those exercises. And not surprisingly, it was KD who was chosen to lead the charge. I had something of a ringside seat at the tail end of the torturous discussions and negotiation that were involved. And I must say that I was very greatly relieved that I had not been tapped as the leader of that exercise. But at the same time, with particular sense, later on I was charged with aspects of the implementation, I must acknowledge that the cultural shift that was implicit in semesterization could not have occurred if KD and Andrew Lewis, his trusty lieutenant, had not for at least 2 years worked patiently and hard to bring us to that particular point. So, whatever merits or demerits reside in the semester system, that system remains as a memorial to KD's ability to rise to an enormous challenge. Finally, like some historians, I have been tempted to search history in order to see whether I could find rough parallels for KD's achievements and for his personal and management style. By dredging up my scant Roman history, courtesy of Livy, I think I found a rough model in Quintus Fabius Maximus, one of the Roman generals during the Second Punic War, that is the war with Carthage, and particularly the war which featured the great general Hannibal. Some of you would have heard of it. Some of you also might be aware of Quintus Fabius because Fabian, as in the Fabian society, derives from his name. Contemporaries, mainly his detractors, call him Cunctator. And yes, before you snigger too much, Cunctator means delayer. Now let us be clear. I am not suggesting that KD was ever a procrastinator. Rather like Quintus Maximus, he would only strike when he was good and ready. and he would prepare for that decisive strike by retreating when necessary, by harassing the enemy, and especially by building strategic alliances to isolate and choke the enemy. Now, I'm not suggesting that KD was facing a Hannibal, but I remember very clearly how he deployed Andrew Lewis. And I say how he deployed Andrew Lewis was a classic example of the application of the original Fabian tactics. Therefore, when I look back at what has transpired at this campus over the last 30 years or so, I must say, that one needs a Quintus Fabius Maximus to prepare the way for the splendid victories of Scipio Africanus. It is he who finally defeated Hannibal. So, ladies and gentlemen, let me close by spelling out what these flashbacks were supposed to achieve. It has been an honor and privilege for me to observe the making and the performance of an academic leader, the academic leader who is being so appropriately honored today. Thank you.
Thank you, Sir Woodville, for that touching, comprehensive, sometimes titillating tribute to Sir Keith, the man, your friend, the university man, and a diplomat extraordinaire. In the beginning, there was Victor Cook. Mr. Cook was one of this institution's first administrators, having joined as an accountant that early group operating out of the St. Michael's School, which, under the chairmanship of St. Augustine Principal and the Pro-Vice Chancellor Dudley Higgins, was charged with the preparatory work for the opening of the new College of Arts and Science in Barbados. He may have been an accountant, but I am told that in those early years, everyone multitasked, from specialist to general factotum. Mr. Cook has remained a constant in our affairs until his retirement in 1994. Though he transitioned from accountant to finance officer to bursar, he was always an institution at Cave Hill. Sir Hilary has already stated our debt to him for helping to keep us steady through many a perilous sea. He has served with Principal Hunte for 11 years, but their association would have begun many, many years before, when Sir Keith joined the university in 1964. Since his retirement, Mr. Cook has continued to serve and support the university as a member of the UE Seniors and in any other capacity in which his skill and fierce loyalty to the institution would permit. Ladies and gentlemen, I welcome to the podium a Cave Hill man, Mr. Victor Cook.
Thank you very much, Jackie. I have to, it's a difficult thing to follow the opening remarks of these opening batsmen, but I'll try my best. A section of the last will and testament of Sir Francis Bacon reads thus: "For my name and memory, I leave it to men's charitable speeches and to the next ages." I don't know whether my speech will be charitable, and I'm certainly not of the next ages, but I will launch out into the deep nevertheless. I'm honored to have been asked for the second time in 2 weeks to give remarks in respect of two of my friends and former principals. On this occasion, it is my friend and colleague, Sir Keith Hunte, better known as you heard as KD. I suppose this is because I am now classified as an Aborigine. Or is it Neanderthal? Anyhow, whatever. Suffice it to say, I was on board from St. Michael's School to the harbour and to the hill. I vividly recall when KD joined the old marl and dust site at the harbour, and seawater and dust and rain everywhere, building going on day and night, organized by a robust plantation owner, incidentally owner of the Paradise property, Mr. Winston Ward, who would raise his stentorian voice from the northern end of the J.C. Trade Fair site to the entrance, putting any drill sergeant to shame. I'm glad to know that one of those maintenance workers, Mr. David Davis, is still with us. Sir Keith regarded as a miracle that he even knew, through his father, the late Clement Hunte, that a post was advertised at the College of Arts and Science for a history lecture. Do you know, people used to stop me and ask me, that place where you're working down by the harbor, they're really going to give university degrees? Oh, Bajans, of little faith, but look at us now. Katie had just graduated with a PhD from McGill as recipient of a Canadian Commonwealth Award. A journey from St. Joseph's Primary School in his native parish of St. John through Lord School, where there were challenges. One, to pay school fees of $28.50 a term, almost $800 Barbados dollars now. His parents had to cut and contrive to pay that fee for their fourth and last child. Provide uniforms, as my friend and colleague Austin Allen, who is here, says, one on your back and one in the wash. Books and petty fees. No uniform grant, no free books. The other challenge was race. Lodge was a white boarding school. KD and Major Sam Headley were two of the early Barbadians of color, the raisins in the flower, so to speak, who broke the glass ceiling. The next big challenge was the UWI fees. This called for a mortgage of the family property. You think it was easy in those days? Young people, you have a privilege. Don't waste it. Opportunity lost can seldom be recalled. KD hit the ground running. His administrative skills were soon noticed, and he was appointed chairman of his division. Once faculties were established in 1970, he was appointed dean of the Faculty of Arts and General Studies from 1978 to 1980, deputy principal in 1980, and then as acting principal September to November 1983. In that same year, he was appointed pro-vice chancellor of the university and principal of the Cave Hill campus. Sir Keith not only served the university, but his country in several capacities, too numerous to mention. However, some were chair of the Barbados Public Service Commission, the National Reconciliation Commission, and CXC as chair from 1996 to 2002. For his service to education in his country, he was made a Knight of St. Andrew on Barbados' 21st year of independence. Our university awarded him last month Doctor of Laws, honoris causa. And now we come to this naming ceremony today, the third of Cave Hill Hall of Residences, financed by a 20-year loan from the Republic Bank, guaranteed by the Cave Hill campus. If university halls of residence were graded like hotels, this hall would be a 5-star hall, built to attract postgrads and their families and to provide hotel accommodation to tourists during the summer. I would ask that you applaud warmly. They have been mentioned already, but I want you to applaud them. Maurice Clark, architect of the firm CIEL. David Butcher, engineer of the firm Civil and Structural Engineers, ADB Consultants. And Steve Building Works Limited, the contractors. I am glad that a few months ago, the principal reminded the government and public of this country that the Cave Hill campus is an earner of foreign exchange. Almost all of the students living in halls are non-Barbadians, and this adds to our foreign exchange reserves. UWI will pump almost $250 million into the Barbados economy in 2013-2014. That is Cave Hill campus, the Open campus, and the UWI Center. $250 million into the Barbadian economy. But this excludes, of course, the bookstore and the halls of residence. The university employs 873 full-time workers. Let me repeat that figure. 873 full-time workers, plus other part-time and special projects workers, a major employer in this country. As I said in a letter to the press in August, the Cave Hill campus of the UWA is not a parastatal organization awaiting transfers from government. It is an important contributor to the economic development of this country, particularly in the development and preparation of young people, on whom we will depend to keep the ship of state afloat. It would be much more efficient if any of the contributing governments found any difficulty with budgets which they had already approved, to have used the same mechanism, the University Grants Committee, to discuss with the university whatever crisis had arisen since that approval, and then to have planned any remedial action for cutbacks, savings, or any other alternatives which may have to be introduced to guarantee those cutbacks. You heard already how we did it in 1990, but that is history. The university, by its very nature, is a reasonable and analytical organization and would have been, I am confident, willing to work with the University Grants Committee technicians how together problems could have been solved. It is wrong and counterproductive, in my view, to put the entire burden on the students. All hands must be put to the plow, as the Prime Minister often says, and all, I am sure, will rally to the university to make necessary sacrifices, staff, present and retired, the campus itself, corporate Barbados, and students, to keep this engine of growth and development alive. Talking about all hands to the plow, I am pleased and very heartened at the groundbreaking proposal which the Barbados Workers' Union is preparing to discuss with the Barbados Light and Power, trimming some existing benefits so that the cost of electricity could be reduced. That is, interests of country before self. Way to go, Sir Roy and the Barbados Workers' Union. Thanks. Back to Sir Keith. We could not have placed this honor on a better person. Humble, honest, bright, diplomatic, always ready to dissipate tension and contentiousness. He was not a micromanager, but allowed staff appointed to manage to do just that. A man dedicated to his family. He cared for his father and his beloved sister Myrtle until their deaths. His 4 children journeyed to the family home in St. John almost every weekend, I'm told, to savor his gastronomic delights. You think Holy Chef Edie could cook up a storm? Katie still has so much more to give. The country air in St. John seems to keep him fit and well. Our Principal Sir Hill is always saying that it appears that he is following in Katie's way. Beware, my brother. He has many more mountains to climb. Henry Wordsworth Longfellow said, "Let us then be up and doing, with a heart for any fate, still achieving, still pursuing, learn to labor and to wait." The ceremony of naming this hall in Sir Keith's honor may appear to some like gilding the lily, but I know that to him it will be one of his most treasured accolades. God bless Sir Keith and his daughter Mary and 3 sons, John, Christopher, and Lawrence, the University of the West Indies, and this hall named in honor of Brother Keith. I crave your indulgence to share some tidbits of information prepared for me about Sir Keith by his executive assistant, Mrs. Andrea Bryce, who is here. Andrea, please stand and be recognized. Andrea, please stand and be recognized. They're not very juicy, so we leave those parts for another time. Sir Keith always, this is what Andrea wrote, Sir Keith had always had universities' well-being at heart. Money must be kept in reserve for new programs, one of his mottos. That's why you got to inherit. Sir Keith inherited Sir Sidney's office and in which was included carpet and drapes. Obviously, he wanted no changes that would incur spending university's money. He was happy to keep the old carpet and drapes. He didn't see anything wrong with them. Even when the carpet became frayed and changed color, he remained adamant that it can be fixed. Get Mr. Cox to get the maintenance department to do it. Well, he had to go on leave, and the rest is history. New carpet, new drapes. It was customary for the principal's car to be changed every 3 years. Not Sir Keith. Sir Keith licked the stuffing out of his... and Eugene Bell is here to testify to that. Before he agreed to get a new one, in spite of the many times it spent at the service station. Humanitarian. This has always stayed with me, said Andrea. I think it was June or Joan, Anyway, one of them was on leave, and a very pregnant young lady was sent to the office as a replacement. Everyone had negative comments to make. She was an embarrassment to the principal's office. This is the principal's office. They could have sent someone else. Andrew says she went to Sir Keith and told him what was being asked and what he thought. His response? She needs the money now more than ever. I will not take bread out of anyone's mouth over such. There was needed no accolades, humble. There was an occasion, I think it was meeting Reus CMD off campus, and Dr. Stan Reed called Sir Keith, Keith, and he was promptly corrected by Sir John Stanley Goddard, who said that he should have said Sir Keith. Sir Keith interjected, probably to soften the moment, that Stan was probably right, since he was Keith Hunte from birth and will always be so. He was popular always, receiving lots of invitations, and he sometimes asked why it was that people always wanted him in the newspaper, skinning his teeth. Family. On a day of being told that he looked really snazzy, he remarked, "It's my son's shirt. He wears mine, so I can wear his too." Once he had a call from someone claiming to be calling from his daughter's school to report that she was in an accident. Fortunately, it turned out to be a hoax, but we almost had to call the ambulance for him. This is what Angie. Thank you, Angie. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
I'm happy that these proceedings are being recorded so that tributes such as Sir Woodville's and yours, so full of lore, and in your case, with a little touch of a rod of correction, will be available to future historians for the record. I can attest to one dimension of Sir Keith's husbandry of his resources. I remember Sir Keith coming up the road from town up Spring Garden Drive, and I was really honored to be just in time to rescue you, to bring you to the campus when your car broke down. And now the man of the hour, our honoree, Sir Keith Hunte.
Colleagues and friends, I tried my best to anticipate what would happen this morning. I feared the worst, and it did. Meaning my colleagues, under the guise of telling the truth, told some uncomfortable truths. They got a few things right. But let me say that, and I began without even greeting, I suppose protocols observed, but I seen the president of the guild, Mr. Paris, who introduced himself to me on the occasion of graduation, and when I inquired what his post was, identified himself. And then Sir Hilary, you're in serious trouble. For the next 10 minutes, he told me how great a person I was. So I wanted to repay the compliment, but please, students who are here, please convey the message to Mr. Paris. I wish him very well in his tenure of office and in the career. No, seriously, the decision of the campus and the university this year to confer of me the honorary degree of the Doctor of Laws, and I'm a Latin scholar, honoris causa, bowled me over because I hadn't applied. And I want to thank Dr. Jennifer Obida, who in her inaugural round as public orator, said some wonderful things about me. I wish I had you at my back when I was applying for things. And then, when the registrar, Jackie Wade, negotiated with me whether this morning was satisfactory, and I late in the day confirmed that I had one appointment, my monthly meeting of the Board of NICE that starts at a civilized hour, 7:30, on the understanding that you get away by 9. Would you believe that this morning they threatened to go past 9? So at 5 to 9, I signaled the deputy chair and I left. But before I left, they made some congratulatory noises. And with perhaps less reverence than is my due, I said, well, you know, I've been done the signal honor this morning of visiting the site of my tombstone while I'm alive. But not really. I really must go, and I got away. But then this morning I heard about temperance. I heard the principal, in his usual very generous remarks, refer to the extent to which he thought that the way I conducted the affairs of the deliberations, etc., were commendable. And I was reflecting that this was no special agenda. I think we are all the victims of our biography. I say this because there is no sense in which reflecting on what I call good fortune, but what I think about being born at the right time in a number of respects, that I could have written the script. And your generosity, my former colleagues and the community at large, merely confirms it. But what I want, and I know you need refreshment, so I will not blow the moment for you. But what I want to say is, it is a source of tremendous satisfaction that this university has provided leadership over the years at all campuses, and in particular, I want to commend Professor Sir Hilary Beckles and his colleagues at this campus for flying the flag high. And let me say, you must say to yourself, this too shall pass. Mr. Cook has reminded us that we were able, not as a crisis as serious as this, to write it out. And the strength of a university community is its strongest weapon. It's a learning community. You can discuss, you can expose the thing. Transparency in that context is a powerful weapon. Use it. On behalf of my family and myself, I wish to thank you for this. I want your public relations officers to make it clear, no rents are payable to me. But I'm sure that all of those who visit these splendid arrangements will wish to thank you and your colleagues for, and the real creators of it, for the splendid facility which you've given the campus, the country, and the region. More power to the University of the West Indies. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sir. Thank you, Sir Keith. I invite you to stand. It remains now for me to invite the members of the front row and invite Father Space for all of us to witness the cutting of the ribbon, to declare the hall opening, and the unveiling of the signage. I thank you all for your kind attention this morning. I thank you.